Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Always in Season podcast, episode number 15. This week, we are moving now to the NFC and starting with the NFC North.
Yeah, we have some weekly news first. So Dak Prescott, he had been in a walking boot. He was shown like on vacation in a walking boot. But then the rumors were that he'd be fine during training camp. Turns out, he was in a walking boot because he had two rough workouts, or like hard workouts, and it made the ankle that he had surgery on feeling sore, and so he did the walking boot out of protection and precaution on vacation. But he should be ready to go by training camp. Other news, Miley Cyrus is rumored to be the halftime show for this year's Super Bowl. Personally, I never watched the halftime show, but for those of you who don't want to watch the game and just want to watch the commercials and shows, yeah, Miley Cyrus sounds like as of now, it's early, but as of now will be the halftime show. And then Josh Allen, he's a defensive end. He is now changing his name to Joshua Hines Allen, so it's hyphenated. It's all about his family and legacy and being able to kind of have both roots, like being able to represent both roots. So.
Yeah, as far as like the Super Bowl halftime show goes, I usually don't watch it. It's just like it's there. It's like, oh, that's just my time to get up, go to the bathroom, get food, whatever. The commercials are nice.
No, they're not.
I mean, some of them are. You look forward to like I don't know, like the M&M was one, the Dorito one.
No, I never.
They're not what they used to be for sure.
No. Okay,
I don't
sorry.
don't watch it for the commercials.
The real football fans out there,
Yeah.
they don't care about the commercials or the halftime show.
So
they care about the
you just
game.
ignore the commercials.
I really don't give a crap about the commercials.
No,
I talk with okay. So the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If we're not having like a Super Bowl party,
Yeah.
it's me, my dad, other family members may be around. Me and my dad watching the Super Bowl, and during commercials, and when we talk about the game.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Mute commercials. Halftime show, like you said, food, bathroom, whatever.
Yeah.
Talk more extensively. Wait until the announcers actually get to talk a little bit about what happened, even though they barely get any moments during the halftime show.
Anyways,
that's it for weekly news.
Yeah, so we're going to move on first to the Chicago Bears.
All right, so now we will dive into the Chicago Bears, who went 7-10 last season, did not make the playoffs. Their offensive rank was 20th, defensive rank was 12th, and special teams was 14th. So not awful, but not where they wanted to be.
Yeah, both offensively and defensively, they could run the ball and they could stop the run. Part of that was because of Justin Fields. But their passing offense was 27th and 25th defensively for passing, so they definitely need some help there.
Yeah, for their coaching additions, Jennifer King, offensive assistant running backs coach, first female coach in team's history. Chad Morton, running backs coach as well. He has 24 seasons of NFL experience as a player and assistant coach. Chris Beatty, Thomas Brown, Robbie Picasso, Jason Howdling, Shane Waldron, and Eric Washington. So a lot of coaching changes, but that usually happens, especially when they're trying to, have a fresh start under new quarterback Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and then free agency, they added Kevin Byard, Jonathan Owens, DeAndre Swift. They got Keenan Allen in that big trade, and then Mercedes Lewis. Their offense, they have high hopes for their offense this year, especially with Caleb there.
Yeah, their first two picks were Caleb Williams and Romo Dunze, so they're expecting big things from them. Now they're rookies, so it's hard to rely on the rookies, but later we'll talk about their schedule, and they have an interesting schedule design. For coaching losses, offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, quarterbacks coach Andrew Janako, receivers coach Tyke Tolbert, running backs coach Omar Young, and assistant tight ends coach Tim Zetz. They were all relieved of their duties. They've been replaced. Again, when you have new offensive playmakers, a lot of times they'll try to change the coaches out. Their bigger player losses were Cody Whitehair and Eddie Jackson.
And Justin Fields.
Justin Fields is a big one, but yeah. But yeah, for their schedule difficulty, it's 29th toughest, so they have an easier schedule, and the interesting part of their schedule is that they don't have a division game until week 11. And I firmly believe the schedule makers did this to help Caleb Williams out, make it so that he doesn't have these division losses, in the beginning. They start out, like Titans, Texans, Colts, Rams, Panthers, Jags, so not awful, but up and down. They have a week 7 bye week. But where it gets interesting is week 11. They have the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions in a row. So 3 division games in a row. and that Lions game is a Thanksgiving game. Then they have the 49ers, the Vikings again, the Lions, the Seahawks, and the Packers. They don't catch a break after week 11, or from week 11 on. They don't catch a break. Their easier games are probably the Vikings, but it's a division game, so they're big games. And the Seahawks, I guess it is a little bit unknown, but they're still a well-run team and organization.
So it seems like Caleb needs to hit his stride early, because if they, these division games, even if they're bad teams in the division, they're always fun to watch. They're always important. Yeah. So Caleb, if they want to make the playoffs, they need to win the games early on.
Yeah, and the problem with the Bears last season was the fourth quarter. They won a lot of games in 3 quarters. So it's a matter of keeping those leads, but they need to get those leads first. And we'll see if that happens with this young offense. But I think that's it for the Chicago Bears. Next up, we'll move on to the Minnesota Vikings.
All right, next up in the NFC North, we have the Minnesota Vikings. They went 7-10 last year, but this is definitely a feel-out year for them.
Their offensive rank was 10th, defensive rank was 16th, and special teams rank was 6th. Their coaching additions, nothing huge, but Sean Sarrett is the system's offensive line coach, replacing Justin Riscotti, who joined the Bengals. And Sarrett used to work for the Chargers, and he worked with Pro Bowl players like Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater. And then Henry Schneider, assistant to the head coach, Marcus Dixon, D-line coach, Mike Pettin, assistant head coach and outside linebackers coach, and then Josh McCown, which is an interesting one because he used to play. He's a journeyman. So that's it for their coaching additions. They didn't have anything significant for coaching losses, though.
Yeah, offensively, they 5th in passing, 29th in rushing. So that Kirk and Justin Jefferson was their offense. Defensively, they were 24th in passing and 8th in rushing, so their secondary got beat up. As far as additions go, for players, they got Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan, and Brandon Powell. Jones is a great addition for them. He's a great locker room guy. Obviously, he's not young, so I think more than anything, he's going to help those young guys. Especially all the rookies. But yeah, I think the biggest loss was Kirk. I think they did extend Jefferson, as we all know, but
it's tough when you lose your number. Your QB1, and Kirk Cousins really did a good job for them. And Justin Jefferson had some struggles with him, but overall he really liked playing with Kirk. Yeah. But now it's J.J. McCarthy, who was their first-round pick, and then they also had another first-round pick, Dallas Turner, is edge from Bama. So they're expecting big things from those guys. It's possible that J.J. McCarthy won't start out right away, but if he does, we'll have JJ to JJ, so that'll be fun. But for player losses, like you said, Kirk Cousins, and then, there was more than just that, like Greg Joseph, even Joshua Dobbs, Alexander Madison, Dean Lowry, Danielle Hunter, Jordan Hicks, Marcus Davenport. Those are some big names, and some guys who had been around for a little while, too. So a lot of leaders that they lost, but like you said, it'll be a feel-out year. But their schedule isn't extremely intimidating. It's 15th toughest. They don't have any, significantly tough stretches. They have, their first 3 weeks are going to be competitive. Buccaneers, Eagles, Chargers. Later on, they have a stretch of the 49ers, Packers, and Falcons. And then their last 3 weeks, they have Lions, Packers, Lions. So those are just interesting little stretches to keep an eye on, and their bye week is week 13.
Yeah, the Lions, Packers, Lions, 3 division games to end it out is not, especially with teams that are the 2 teams that we kind of expect to be at the top. But yeah, overall, there's really not that many expectations. They just need to see what they have in JJ McCarthy. So when you don't have much expectations, I think things can go okay for you.
Yeah, and if the Vikings are in the race for the division, those 3 games are going to be absolutely crucial. Or just if they're in the fight for the wild card. So, yeah, that's it for the Minnesota Vikings. And next up, we have the Green Bay Packers.
All right, next up for the NFC North, we have the Green Bay Packers. Last year, they went 9-8, and they surprised a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, but they did lose to the 49ers in the divisional round, but they were close. Offensive rank was 11th, defensive rank was 17th, special teams rank was 5th. So, what do you have for their stats?
I think 12th in passing, 15th in rushing. Offensively, defensively 9th in rushing, and No, sorry, ninth in passing, 28th in rushing. They could not stop the run. 128 yards a game rushing is just not going to cut it.
Yeah, they have a lot of new additions, especially for the defensive side of the ball for coaching staff. Jeff Halfley is their new defensive coordinator. They lost Joe Barry. They fired him, and Jeff Halfley is a really good coach. His scheme works really well with the Packers. What the Packers have of their skill sets. Aaron Hill is their new strength and conditioning coordinator. Derek Ainsley is their passing game coordinator on defense. Anthony Campnine, linebackers, running game coordinator. Sean Duggan is their defensive assistant. Eddie Gordon, assistant offensive line coach. Marcus Jones, strength and conditioning assistant. They added Sean Mannion for an offensive assistant. They have Vince Ogabase as an assistant defensive line coach. Anthony Perkins, defensive quality. Ben Schumacher, strength and conditioning. And Miles White, they have coaching assistant. So they added a lot, but the big one is Jeff Halfley. Yeah. Everyone under him will help out with his scheme and regime. But it should be interesting to see how they do under a new defensive coordinator, especially when it comes to rushing.
Yeah, I think Halfley, players, guys like Preston Smith have just come out and said that how excited they are for him and his defense. It sounds like he's a great players coach. He relates very well to the players, which is always a positive. So they've always had the weapons on the defensive end. It's just being able to utilize them to their strength, which hopefully they can do this year.
Yeah, and Joe Barry, I honestly don't think he was an awful coach that people made him out to be. It's just that his scheme really didn't mesh well with what the Packers had, their players' skill sets. He wanted to drop back more, where these players, they're much more skilled to rush the quarterback, and that's exactly what Jeff Halfley does. For their draft, they started with offensive tackle Jordan Morgan. Also grabbed Edgar Cooper, who was projected a first-round pick. Javon Bullard, a safety, and then they also were. They say that Marshawn Lloyd, running back, was the best running back in the draft class. And then they got a steal in round 7 with Kalen King a corner. That was the draft consensus. But they also had some free agency additions.
Yeah, additions. The big ones were Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. I cannot stress how big of a, because Packer fans have talked about getting McKinney, getting a safety, because we have not had, secondary is kind of where we left. We have, Jair, they have them, but getting McKinney, putting him in that secondary with Jair, is going to really help them just all over the defensive side of the ball. And Josh Jacobs is another one. They were able to kind of go back a couple years for their running back, and he fits their age with all of the youth that they have. Even though he is the oldest one on that offense at 26?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He is. And then for key losses for players, they didn't have anything in coaching other than Joe Barry, but for players, Josiah DeGuara, Yash Nijman, Jonathan Owens, Darnell Savage Jr., John Runyon, and their big one was Aaron Jones. But they did fill that void well with Josh Jacobs. We'll just see how it goes. For schedule difficulty, it says 4th toughest. It's a lot of competitive games, I would say. Their tough stretch is week 12 through 14. They have the 49ers, the Miami Dolphins, which is Thanksgiving, and then the Detroit Lions. They start off week 1 in Brazil against the Eagles, which I know everyone's looking forward to, because, when it's not here in the United States, it's exciting. Yeah. So, in the Philadelphia Eagles, a lot of people are excited to see how they are, because it was they were the best team, unbeatable, and then they dropped off. So, yeah, that's it for the Green Bay Packers. Last but not least, we have the Detroit Lions.
All right, last up for the NFC North is the Detroit Lions. They went 12-5 last year, and they lost in the NFC Championship to the San Francisco 49ers.
Their offensive rank was 3rd, defensive rank was 19th, and special teams was also 19th. What are the stats?
Yeah, passing, they were 2nd, 5th in rushing, and 5th in points. So they found their groove offensively. Defensively, it was kind of a different story. 27th in passing, 2nd in rushing, which good. That's obviously very good, but 23rd in points. So I'm very impressed at how quickly they've flipped around.
Yeah, their coaching additions, nothing massive. Jim O'Neill, defensive assistant, Terrell Williams, defensive line, and then Deshea Townsend, defensive backs coach on passing game coordinator. For coaching losses, Jim Holster, senior offensive assistant, Wayne Blair, defensive quality control, John Scott Jr. for defensive line coach, Dre Bly as corner coach, and then Brian Duker as defensive backs coach.
But I think the big one is Dan Campbell. I think a guy that he's been there for a couple of years, but I love him. He's such a player's coach. He gets very emotional talking about his players and his team, and I'm glad the Lions finally found someone that just completely flipped the culture. And I think he got his extension rightfully so. Rightfully so. There was talk about maybe him going back, going to college, but he knows where he wants to be, and will.
He should be there for a while.
He should be there for a very long time.
For new additions for players, obviously in the draft, they grabbed Terry and Arnold and Ennis Rakenstraw. Those were some really big picks for them. And then for free agency, you had a few.
Yeah, Marcus Davenport, Amik Robertson, DJ Reader, Kevin Zietler. But mostly it was the losses. I think those were bigger. Tracy Walker, Cam Sutton, Zach Ertz, Josh Reynolds, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So their secondary, some of the players, they replaced them in the draft, I feel like, but guys just that I think were some bright spots that they were let go, but they did re-sign in my opinion, their three best players: Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Penei Sewell, which.
They also did lose Jonah Jackson as well as Will Harris, and then they retired with David Blau. Teddy Bridgewater was hired to coach high school Florida team, and then Edge Romeo Aquara retired as well. So they had a few retirements. They did a good amount of losses, but they're still a really solid team. They have a good core. Their schedule difficulty is 11th toughest. They don't have any significantly tough stretches, kind of like the Vikings and the Packers, but they have very up and down. It's they start off with the Rams, which is just an interesting, exciting game for everyone because it's the whole Stafford Goff thing, and other players traded around too. But they have an early bye week because they have the Rams, Bucks, Cardinals, Seahawks, and then they already have their bye. And the early bye weeks can be tough, as we've talked about. In the middle of the season, they play the Packers and the Texans back-to-back, which could be tough. But they don't play the Bears until week 13, which I think is interesting. Caleb Williams gets to wait to play against the previous division winner, so that'll be a fun matchup. And then they play Packers, Bills, Bears, Niners, Vikings to end the season.
Yeah, the Lions are, I believe they're the favorites to win the division, and I think they should be because they were good last year. But I think a lot of people expect that division to kind of be a two-horse race, just because the Vikings and the Bears just they're young, they need to figure it out. There's a chance, obviously that one of those two teams could, a lot of guys could step up, but I think the Lions are in a really good spot, and hopefully they made it to the NFC Championship for the first time in a long time, and their fans are finally have something to cheer about, and I think they will be a problem for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah, the NFC North should be a really fun division. We have some rookie quarterbacks, we have some really promising teams, and I think, like you said earlier, the Lions and the Packers are expected to be in the race for the division win, but when you have rookie quarterbacks in their teams, it's exciting to see just their development throughout the season, see if they look promising to be the franchise guy or not. So should be a fun one for the NFC North. So that's it for this week, and next week we will do the NFC South.